Hi everyone, good evening and welcome to this, our 6th Barrel Club virtual tasting experience. And officially, happy Christmas. To mark the occasion, we have a very special tasting coming to you live from the Irish Whisky Academy here at Midleton Distillery in County Cork. For those of you who joined us for the September show broadcast from our Bow Street distillery, you'll recall we focused on the spirit of innovation with Jameson, where we sampled 4 Jameson whiskies, including a Barrel Club first bottling of Jameson Single Pot Still. Magic. Tonight, in the true spirit of the festive season, we'll celebrate the taste of Christmas. And what do we mean by that? Well, our blenders have selected 4 whiskies that each, in their own way, represent the holiday season, culminating in a Barrel Club exclusive first bottling of our hero bottle in your December pack, Redbreast Christmas Cake Edition. As our master blender Billy Lighton describes it, it's Christmas cake in a bottle. So Christmas party season is now in full swing and we're really delighted that you could join us this evening. As always, a special welcome to all of our new members, including those tuned in from Northern Ireland, England, Scotland and Wales. We hope you'll enjoy your first taste of our Barrel Club selection. My name is Tommy Byrne. I'm the International Whisky Ambassador and Academy Tutor here at the Midleton Distillery. And this very building is where I spend a good deal of my time, so I'm really delighted to be hosting this evening's tasting. Before we meet tonight's panel, I'd like to tell you a little bit about where I'm standing, the Irish Whisky Academy here at Midleton Distillery. Here's a short film to give you a flavour of what to expect.
The Irish Whisky Academy is the heart and home of Irish whisky. It's a centre of excellence where people will come here and learn the story of Irish whisky.
It wasn't just about the liquid and it wasn't just about the technical side. It's very easy on these courses to become so obsessed with that you lose the touch and the importance of linking whisky to land and to people and to history.
The story of production isn't all about the machinery that we use, it's about the people behind the actual brands that make it as well. They're proud in what they do. You know, any distillery can make a whiskey, but it's the people behind it what defines how that whiskey is what it is when it comes from here in Midleton. Once they've learned everything that there is to know, they'll do what we call premium tastings. So you might learn about Irish whisky as a category of whisky and then compare it to Scotch and to bourbon, so people get an understanding of what whisky is and then how it differs depending on the country that it's made in.
And I can honestly say that this is the finest training facility I've ever been in and some of the finest training I've ever had.
Okay folks, I hope you're somewhere comfortable like I am, with the heat on, perhaps by the fire and with a friend or two maybe around to enjoy the tasting. Be sure to have some water on hand to sip on throughout. As always, we do want you to enjoy our tasting responsibly. So we have a great lineup for you over the next hour and a half or so, where we'll explore the selection of whiskies which are included in your pack. We'll taste each of them with our fantastic panel of experts. And without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce our panel. So making his very first Barrel Club appearance is no other than our master blender, Mr. Billy Lighton. So Billy, you're very welcome tonight.
Tommy, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, and thank you as well for inviting me here into your beautiful, cosy living room.
Yeah, no, Christmas is in the air. Pleasure to have you. And joining Billy, folks, and making up, I suppose, the other half of the dynamic blending duo for tonight is our other blender. And Dave McCabe, it's your second Barrel Club appearance.
That's right, Tommy, yeah.
So thanks for joining us again.
Pleasure.
And last but certainly not least, a very special guest joining Billy and Dave from our amazing craft ambassador team based at the Visitor Centre here at Midleton. A very warm welcome to Roisin Barry. So, Roisin, thanks for joining us also.
Thanks for having me, Tommy. Traffic was terrible coming in now.
Yeah, you didn't have too much to travel. And for all of our attendees joining from abroad, if you want to know what a real Cork accent is like, Roisin is the one to listen to tonight.
Born and bred by.
So look, we're really excited about tonight's theme. It is the taste of Christmas. It really is hard to believe, we're almost midway through December already. I don't know where the year has gone. So let's get started. We're going to review and of course taste our whiskies in the following order, and this is outlined on your tasting mat, which actually came inside your Barrel Club whiskey box. So we're going to start off with the 50ml sample of Jameson's Stout Edition. Then we'll try the 50ml sample of Power's Gold Label. Then 50ml sample of Redbreast 12-year-old. And finally, Base de Resistance, it's our Barrel Club exclusive first bottling. It's the Redbreast Christmas Cake Edition. So as we enjoy these whiskies, if you do have any questions you'd like to ask us, please pop them in the chat box. We will get through as many as possible as we go through tonight. So we're ready for our first tasting of the evening, and this is our Jameson Stout Edition. So this is part of our Caskmate series. And Roisin, I know you're going to talk us through this tasting. It's a whiskey you're very familiar with. There's a nice link here, I suppose, with the Bow Street Distillery in Dublin, and that kind of echoes your life as well, so you might want to touch on that a bit.
Yeah, so I started off with the Bow Street Distillery last year and spent a year in Dublin. They welcomed me into their home and had a great year there, and only recently moved back home to Cork. But the heart of Jameson has always been innovation, and Caskmates is a great example of this. And as well, I've liked how it's kind of evolved over time as well. So we started with one craft brewery, we've moved partnerships with another now, 8 Degrees. And it's a great festive Christmas whiskey as well. There's a lot of layers to it. So I suppose without further ado, we'll get tucked into it.
Yeah, amazing.
So you've got your Stout Edition in front of you guys, so just give it a little swirl first. See how the tears run down. So it'll be a medium-bodied whiskey, like your Jamesons are usually. And when you give it a smell, might get a bit of fresh-cut hay, maybe some green apples, pears, bit of lime zest, those lovely pot still spices, and that nose of chocolate as well, so that lovely Christmassy feeling coming in through there. And when you're ready, have a little taste of it. So
Launch it.
launch it. So I always find with Jameson Stout, you've got a lovely mouth coating from the pot still. You have the touch of hops and the cocoa beans coming from the beer cask and the coffee. And then the finish, once it goes down, it's smooth as butter. And then you get your lovely long, sweet butterscotch and your chocolate finish again. And it's a lovely versatile whiskey. You can always have it on its own or alongside your stout, or even in cocktails, anything, Irish coffees or espresso martinis or anything like that. Or
Just as you mentioned, like festive and this
Yeah.
time of year, like an Irish coffee, Caskmate Stout would be a great whiskey to use, because as you said, it has all that kind of coffee-esque type of notes from the stout, even cocoa nibs and things like that. That'd be very versatile in the first place, but an excellent Irish coffee.
Yeah, the Stout
Stout as
cask
well.
kind of shines through. Like, it doesn't dominate it, so it's not like it's not a beer cask flavoured whiskey, but it's kind of like Jameson Original, which is that kind of nice layer of the beer cask.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree. Like the chocolate, there's that texture as well, the smoothness, the chocolate, the cocoa, and they're kind of aromas and flavours that you would get in Jameson Original. But I think what the Stout cask adds is complementary to what's already there. You know, so as Tommy says, it's not just whiskey in a beer cask.
absolutely, yeah. There's a lovely extra layer added in there as well.
Yeah, and for some of our members who received the September drop, tasted the IPA edition, so it's a nice contrast with what we think of a beer cask, but within the kind of sphere of beers, obviously each cask will give a totally different flavour influence.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
IPA be more citrus. We talk about grapefruit, kind of that citrus hoppy character. So it's very much, it parallels the influence it has on Jameson, one with a different layer of additional flavour compared to the stout cask seasoning. So it's very interesting.
And I know you briefly touched on the history of Caskmates or maybe how it started. For those who maybe aren't aware, I think like a lot of great things in Ireland starts off in a pub. I don't know, maybe Roisin, if you want to maybe go a bit more into that, or
No, absolutely. So yeah, like any good idea. So two of the lads in the pub, and they said, why don't we try, aging a whiskey in a stout cask and vice versa, and that's how it kind of came to be, and it's really kind of grown legs onto it, and it's just another kind of just like real homage to how Jameson is such a spirit of innovation. And you were saying you had the IPA edition at the last Barrel Club show, and that was in the blending class. And also that's just another thing that you can do at the Jameson Bow Street. You can do the blending class up there, which I used to host. I met a couple of Barrel Club members there, and down in Middleton here in the Middleton distillery, it's the behind the scenes store that you can do. So you'll be doing that here as well. So we'd love to have you.
yeah, I think it was timed really well. Obviously, I think we all know the big craft beer boom that happened in the last decade or so. So it was timed really well in that regard. It kind of captured the attention of, maybe even enticed people to try whiskies, even coming from the kind of craft beer sphere, because as you mentioned, it pairs really well with, say, a stout or...
Yeah, well, I suppose like you have the Boilermaker, for example, which is your whiskey with a beer. That in itself maybe brought beer drinkers, give them a little bit more exposure to the whiskey, and now we have it all in the one glass.
Yeah. This is where it's at. And as you said, I mean, Irish coffee, but even the likes of, I've tried it, with soda water and maybe a wedge of lime, really good. An espresso martini, I've got those kind of coffee chocolate, so yeah, it's...
I'm a hot chocolate fan for this one as well. It's great.
Or hot
Very
chocolate,
cozy.
yeah, I mean,
Very cozy.
I'll have to try that one.
Yeah, lovely.
It was probably even ahead of its time, that whole collaboration. We're talking about 2011, 12, that chat in the bar with our good colleague Dave Quinn and Shane Long from the Franciscan Well, and it began with about 12 barrels, just saying, can I take some over and trial some of my stouts in it? And it worked so well for the stout, but he'd nowhere to keep 12 barrels after getting used. So Dave said, well, we'll take them back and fill it with Jameson.
Absolutely. Like, it could easily never have happened.
Yeah.
Dave could have said, oh no, Shane, cut those barrels in half and use them in your garden or whatever. That could easily have been the scenario. But no, we'll take them back. And then we looked at each other and said, all right, now we have them.
Yeah.
It's been stout, and what are we going to do with them?
Happy accident.
And we kept it from the marketing department initially, but then somehow it leaked out, and they got their hands on it and became castmates, and very successful, yeah.
And I should say, folks, again, just to reiterate, if you do have any questions on any of the whiskies, any thoughts in general, please do put them in the chat box. That's what we're here for. So any questions on this, just throw them in the box and we'll get to them. But yeah, really, really nice one to start with. And I think, it really demonstrates the potential of even quite a short maturation. We're not talking about a hugely long time in beer casks. I know throughout the night we're going to talk about spirit and cask influences, but I mean, it's quite a short period of time when it comes to the beer cask.
Yeah, I mean, the beer influence, like they're freshly emptied stout casks. So that beer influence is there. It's quite free whenever it's the cask filled with whiskey. So the flavours transfer pretty quickly. You'd be talking about, like, you would see a difference even inside 2 weeks. But we tend to leave them a bit longer, maybe 3 months to 6 months.
I suppose that demonstrates kind of the craft scale of things as well, that it is down to like seeing how the whiskey develops, and you're picking it at the right moment in time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we have had, we have had batches where we have decided, oh no, this has gone over the top with stout. So we just be careful, because every batch, well, every cask is individual, you know. So every batch of casks, they can be a little bit unpredictable. So we have to keep a close eye on them.
Yeah, brilliant. So I think we do have a question, guys, so we'll go to that. So this is coming from Sean. So when you fill the casks after distillation for aging, do you need to ensure there is no oxygen in the casks as with beer aging? That's actually a really good question. I don't know, Dave, maybe, yeah?
Very good question from Sean, and it's slightly different to beer that way because it's a very high strength spirit. Like when it comes off the stills, if it's pot still distillate, it's 84%, but we would reduce that down to 63.4. And that's enough alcohol to offset any type of microbial bacteria that might build up in the cask, which would be the case maybe for wine or beer at lower strengths. And we actually want aging to happen via oxidation. So we want air actually getting in, mixing with the whiskey, which does a lot of things. There's kind of additive reactions from the alcohol with the wood. There's interactive reactions between the wood, the spirit, and the air. And then there's reductive reactions where there's kind of the fiery, kind of young character of whiskey actually evaporates through the wood. So the oxidative process is actually a good thing for whiskey, which wouldn't be great for beer for sure.
Yeah, nice comparison. Yeah, I suppose you don't have any of the fermentation happening in a whiskey cask, so it's a
Correct.
different concept. Brilliant, thanks, Dave. We actually have another question in this time from David. So, have you seen any subtle differences using the beer barrels compared to the original barrels? Billy, maybe do you want to?
Yeah, I guess what you're asking here is what's the difference between a beer season cask and say a whiskey season cask?
Probably, yeah.
So, I mean, we are looking for a difference whenever we're using the beer cask. You know, we probably would never be tempted to include a beer season cask in a formulation that doesn't require that flavour.
Yeah,
I suppose that stands to sense, you know. But what I'm saying is the beer casks they would be a very individual style that we would only use in a particular formulation. We would only have beer casks if we had a home for them, for that beer influence. I hope that answers the question.
They're brilliantly unique in their own right.
Exactly,
That's why
yeah.
we use them. Brilliant. Great to have those questions coming in, folks. So again, please do keep them coming. Just type them in the chat box and we'll try to get to as many as we can throughout the night. So thanks for that, Roisin and Dave and Billy. Really nice whiskey to start off with. While you're sipping away on that, folks, it is time to mention tonight's competition. And, you know, for the week that's in it, we've assembled a very nice Christmas box. So it's filled with lots of Redbreast goodies from the shop here in Midleton. And for any of you that might be struggling maybe for some gift ideas for loved ones, fear not, just pop over to MidletonDistilleryCollection.com. There's plenty of inspiration there. And there are still a few more days left to guarantee a pre-Christmas delivery. So it's MidletonDistilleryCollection.com. So for tonight's competition, we've a very tough question here. I'm taking absolutely no responsibility. Dave, you're not going to make it easy on them tonight. You're a bad Santa, so I'm going to hand it over to you.
I drew the short straw on this one, I think. So
Yeah.
I'll take one for the team.
Yeah.
It actually kind of ties in with Sean's question there about the oxidative process, because we were chatting earlier before coming on air about aging and maturation, and there is losses during maturation, which we refer to as the angel share. And Billy did some number crunching, and if you were to compare what we're losing in terms of bottles of Redbreast, for example, we'd be losing roughly 48,000 bottles a day just to the atmosphere, the angel share. So I guess the question we are putting to people today is can you imagine how many barrels that we'll need to fill tomorrow that will replace what we lost to the angels today?
Wow.
That's the question.
It's an amazing figure, yeah. Say the accountants have to take a seat every time they look at those figures. So just to reiterate that there, folks, the question for tonight is how many barrels, and we're looking to the nearest barrel, would we have to fill tomorrow morning in order to just replace what we have lost to the Angels share today? And we'll go through that again later on. But how many barrels to the nearest barrel would we have to fill tomorrow morning in order to replace what we have lost to the Angels today? So to be in with a chance to win, all you have to do is type your best guess in the chat box. The nearest answer will scoop that Christmas box prize, and the winner will be announced at the end of the show. And if we have a tie, it'll come down to whoever entered their answer first. So get your answers in there. Now, for those of you who haven't visited Midleton Distillery before, remember it is part of your membership offering to enjoy a behind-the-scenes tour here. And Dave, it's great to have you back on the panel tonight. I believe the last time you were with us was looking at the influence of Spanish oak.
Yeah, and I think we did over in Warehouse A2, which is
Yeah, not far from where we are here. Yeah, so
a bit colder than here.
a bit colder. Yeah, we're a little bit more snug here tonight. Yeah. And obviously A2, another kind of example of a nice old building on the site. And I suppose that everyone in the panel is, but you are very familiar with the site, having been here in numerous different roles. Do you want to maybe tell us a little bit about the kind of the history of Midleton Distillery for those who haven't been here?
Yeah, sure. Like where we are now, we refer to it as the old Midleton Distillery, and where it's all produced, which is just behind us here, it's referred to as the new Midleton Distillery. But how the old one came about, even before it was a distillery, it began life actually as a woolen mills. 1796, a man by the name of Marcus Lynch erected the first original buildings here, and later on they were turned into military barracks in the 1800s during the Napoleonic Wars. But you'll see some of the slides there, and the people, it was, I suppose, bought over the old buildings and turned into a distillery in 1825 by three Murphy brothers, James, Jeremiah and Daniel. Had a connection to the Murphy Stout because brewing and distilling actually nearly pretty much go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make a beer first before you make a whiskey, so it was kind of a plausible reason why brewers would build a distillery, which they did in 1825. And whiskey was produced here then right up until 1970, perhaps 1974, 1975. But during that kind of history, you know, there was a few amalgamations even before Irish distillers. Like if you look in Cork City, there was 4 distilleries there. There was the Watercourse, the North Mall, John Street and the Green. So they actually amalgamated with Midleton Distillery in 1867, and that was to what became known as Cork Distilleries Company. So as a distillery, you know, Midleton was the prime location, you know, from a barley source, water, you know, even the largest pot stills were here at a time as well. Malting was done. There was coopers on site. There was tanners, carpenters, blacksmiths. It was, you know, probably like a small little village.
Yeah,
you know, if you're going
self-contained.
to compare it, self-contained. But then with decline Irish whiskey, you had the merger of distilleries to come together to survive those kind of troubled times. So in 1966 then, Cork Distilleries Company merged with Powers and Jameson. And again, with that amalgamation, Midleton was still picked as the prime location to, you know, continue making whiskey. So the other distilleries eventually closed down in the 1970s as well. With the new distillery, as we call it now, opening in 1975. And we've been producing it pretty much there ever since. So lots of changes, you know, from probably a 10 to 12 acre site in the old distillery. We're up at about 45 hectares up above, 45 warehouses, you know, close to 2 million barrels. It's just a huge scale, and producing both pot still whiskey and grain whiskey to satisfy basically all our brands, you know.
Yeah, and obviously it's great that we do have all the old buildings intact on the site. You know, as you mentioned, kind of 200 years of heritage. Like you just mentioned there as well, though, New Midleton obviously is where all the whiskey is made today, and I think it's nice where we're sitting now. The Academy does kind of straddle both sites. We're kind of on the boundary, if you will. And anyone who's visited the Academy, I know a few of you are tuning in tonight, you'll know we go through what we call the Barley Gates, not the Pearly Gates, but the Barley Gates, and that gives you access to New Midleton. And Billy, not for a minute suggesting that you were around here in 1975 when we made the transition, but I know you're familiar with the heritage of the company, but very familiar with the current operations. If you want to maybe give us an insight into New Middleton.
Well, I wasn't quite around in 1975, Tommy, because I didn't join until 1976. So.
You're a year off.
Yeah, but like the New Middleton distillery, as we refer to it, still, is, as you can imagine, is a very, very busy place. You know, we're producing a lot of whiskey here. Like this year, we'll be distilling somewhere around about 70 million litres of alcohol, and you just can't distill 70 million litres of alcohol without being organised and being prepared to do it. So a lot of what we do here and what keeps us busy on a daily basis is organising things like, you know, where are you going to get the cereal from to produce 70 million litres of alcohol? Where are you going to get all the casks from to fill that into? You know, where are you going to warehouse it? All these things have to be thought of and planned.
And grain to glass, as we say.
Yeah, absolutely. So that keeps us busy. We have from the blending point of view, like we have somewhere around 50 different SKUs that we have to produce, and again, it's the organisation and the planning that goes into that. You know, and that kind of falls to the blenders to do a lot of that planning, because we've got to have the global view of what the capacity of the distillery is and what the demand is from the distillery. So to make the job easier for the blenders, it's up to us to do a lot of that planning in order that we maintain the inventory in the profile that's going to satisfy, you know, to our best estimation, is going to satisfy all the demand that's coming down the road to us, you know.
Yeah, and obviously whiskey, you're looking so far ahead. I suppose we're planning, and we have been planning really since we moved across the wall in 1975. Obviously, we've added, you know, 2 subsequent sets of pot stills. I know from a warehousing point of view, it's crazy. It's kind of mind blowing in the warehousing capacity, not just here in Middleton, but obviously in Dungourney.
Yeah, I mean, well, Dungourney, we and again, it's down to the forecasting and planning. We didn't suddenly find out one day that we've run out of space here in Middleton. We can't warehouse any more casks. So we have the satellite warehousing complex in Dungourney, and I don't know, there's.
And it's on screen for the viewers at the minute.
Yeah, you can see the layout there on the screen just now. I think we have maybe around about 30 units completed there, but we are completing those units regularly. You know, maybe 2 a year or something around that. But again, that all is down to planning,
yeah.
You know, so it's the warehouse space, you know, the cask availability, everything has to be considered.
Yeah,
if you don't do it now, you know, you could easily be caught. So, like for instance, today I was looking at our planning model and planning. Our sales forecast goes out for 40 years, the current year plus another 40 years. So today I was looking at 2063 to see.
We won't ask you what the sales are planned to be by then. We won't put you under pressure at that one.
Yeah, but it is that kind of thing that drives us for further investment, you know.
Yeah, and actually, for the members who tuned into the September live event, we had Kevin O'Gorman, who is a master distiller. He kind of briefly touched on plans where we actually are hoping to expand again. Dave, maybe if you want to maybe just have a quick
Yeah.
mention of that?
Sure, as Billy mentioned, you know, we're planning that far ahead. You need to plan your size of your distillery and your capability as well. So we know that there's going to come a point in time that what we're able to produce is going to come to a point where it's maximized and we won't be able to meet future demand. So by 2025, we're aiming to have a new distillery up and running adjacent to the one that's currently here, and same size, volume and capacity as well. So effectively doubling what we're able to do now. And a part of that large investment going into the new distillery, a lot of that's going into the kind of meeting sustainability targets as well, in terms of carbon neutrality and energy consumption, things like that. So there's a huge amount of work planned, and 2025 won't be long coming. But
Yeah.
we know that we need to start filling casks from that second distillery by then to meet future demand that we've projected in the future.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
So,
and
no,
great,
for sure.
obviously, to have that sustainability side of things as well.
Oh, massive!
Amazing.
And it'll be great to have a new distillery as well as the old new distillery and,
Yeah.
and the old
We're
distillery.
going to have to work on the name, I think, again, aren't we? Yeah. We'll leave that to marketing. And actually, it's worth noting that, obviously, Roisin, you're heavily connected with the tours of the old site here. We're literally in the middle of kind of a redevelopment of that site.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like, as in, so we've got the brand home under construction at the moment. So we're kind of working with a bones operation, and we're able to still do the old Middleton site. So bringing people through the history of how we used to make whiskey here, and then bringing them through the micro, and they get to see how small batches are made through our maturation warehouse into cooperage, things like that. So it's really bringing you from start to finish through all of the production that we do on site, and then the redevelopment. Then that's going to bring new experiences to the home of Middleton. So from blending classes, cocktail experiences, things like that. So it'll be absolutely wonderful to see that come into fruition next year sometime.
Amazing. Yeah. So between the various sites, there's lots in the pipeline. So very exciting. Well, thanks for the overview, folks. And Dave, I think now we're going to move on to our second tasting of the night. So we're going to be trying Power's Gold Label next, folks. And Power's Gold Label, literally distilled through the window just over your shoulder there, Dave. If you want to talk us through it.
Yeah, sure. So as a style, it differs to the likes of Jameson and Middleton, the Spots. Not only because of the distillate type that we use, but also the way we use our barrels. So as you said, it's made all next door. And when we talk about the pot still that goes into the blend of Powers, and when you talk about the distillery itself, we would make typically 3 styles of distillate in Middleton here. And we refer to them as, light, kind of medium and heavy. And they're just kind of our own terminology, really. It's not saying it's a light, kind of watered down whiskey when it's light. It might be more cereal driven, but less maybe fruit and more spice driven. And that's how we would kind of talk about the different styles that we make. So Powers as a brand and as a range is made using exclusively that light style of pot still distillate in the making of Gold Label. It's 100% of the formulation of John's Lane and 3 Swallow Release as well. And as a style, we would consider it kind of on the more spicier style. But we want to try and maintain that then in the making of Powers. So even after the years of aging in oak barrels, we don't want the oak to have too big a say in the final flavour. So from a blending point of view, and how you manage that is how you use your casks essentially. So for example, when barrels come from the States and we use them for the first time, we refer to them as first fill bourbon barrels. And they're very good in terms of oak contribution from a sweetness point of view. Talk about caramel, toasted wood, sometimes a little butterscotch characteristic as well, and vanilla, is a clear one. But if we were to reuse that barrel again a second time, the influence of that wood on the whiskey will diminish as well. So it lets the spirit kind of shine through a bit more than had it been in just a first fill. Mm-hmm. And that's where Powers comes into play, because what we do is we use that light style spirit and we age it in a combination of first fill bourbon, but to a greater extent those refilled bourbon or refill bourbon, second fill, even third fill. And after all the years of aging, when you marry them all together, the spirit kind of shines a bit more through than it would be if it was all in new barrels or in first fill bourbon. So we would call it a more distillate-led style of whiskey.
Yeah.
But there is grain whiskey in there as well, to a lesser extent, and we would say that kind of, you know, rounds the edges a bit more. It gives it a bit more of that kind of more delicate floral character. But that grain also develops more sweetness from the bourbon barrels as well. So if you were to compare it to the likes of Jameson, we would talk about Jameson being a bit more maybe orchard fruits driven, a bit maybe smoother, more pencil shavings type character. And there's a sherry cask usage in Jameson Original, which there isn't in Powers Gold Label. So if you want to get a glass and we'll nose it, and this is at 40%.
Like you said, it's kind of a good example of how whiskey isn't just about the casks or just about the spirit. You're going to have both of those influences
Yeah,
shining through, which is nice.
again, you know, when we're focusing on blending this evening, it's about finding balance, and it's about finding balance for the brand you're making your whiskey for. So the balance here is paring back the wood a bit and pushing the spirit forward. That's the balance for Powers. But then the balance for Redbreast could be pushing the sherry wine casks forward and, you know, pushing a bit of that distillate character and pulling back on certain other elements. So with this one on the nose, because we're pushing back the wood, you could say there's a bit more of a like a peppery character, like white pepper would be a good kind of descriptor. But the wood isn't exactly absent either. It's there. So when we do talk about vanilla or even a bit of cinnamon spice, that would be quite evident in Powers.
Kind of fits. You can see where it's fitting into that kind of Christmas theme with the cinnamon and the cloves.
Cinnamon, exactly. Pepper, there is a little clovey note, but even, you know, we talked about Castmates on the Irish coffee, like Powers would be a very good example of what you would use for maybe a hot toddy, like a hot whiskey, because you are using honey, hot water, lemon and clove, that you want a whiskey that will still showcase its presence in amongst all those other flavours, and a bold kind of robust whiskey like Powers would be a perfect example of
Shines through.
shining through,
Yeah.
exactly. But if you want to give it a taste as well.
Yeah, you have that lovely warm and spice come through.
Yeah. Definitely.
Just wraps around your tongue.
Yeah, there's very good texture there, but there is that kind of very mild kind of chili oil prickle of a spice, along with maybe even a touch of nutmeg. But there's sweetness there as well again. But, you know, if you were looking at it compared to Castmates, for example, what we had, Castmates was probably a bit more viscous and a bit more kind of creamy, whereas I think this would be a very good example of whiskey that isn't as viscous but carries a bit more of a punch. And it's the exact same amount of alcohol. So it's not the higher the strength, the spicier the whiskey. It's how you play again with the spirit and the barrels to accentuate spice without having to just have more alcohol.
Yeah,
essentially.
demonstrating what you're saying with the spirit and balancing it with the wood and stuff, yeah. Actually, Dave, you mentioned some of the other whiskies within the Powers range. You mentioned one called John's Lane. That's maybe a good opportunity just to mention for those who might not be aware, you know, the original distillery for Powers was up in Dublin on John's
That's
Lane.
right.
And
So you had Powers as a distillery in John's Lane Distillery, and that was basically at a time prior to the 1970s, where you also had Jameson in Bow Street, and then, as I mentioned, the Middleton Distillery in Cork. So Powers was 1791 established in Dublin, was distilling up there all that time through all the good times and the bad times, but eventually made its way down here during the amalgamation. And I guess that stands to reason why we do produce 3 distillates today. You know, when you think about it, Jameson ceasing operations in Dublin and Powers and moving to Middleton, you know, it would have been hard to maybe have the members of the board deciding on which style of whiskey are we only going to focus on now. So the idea of being versatile as a distillery, creating 3 expressions of distillates that perhaps at the time reflected those distilleries that were in Dublin and the old distillery Middleton, kind of stands to reason. And it's why we've been kind of making 3 individual styles ever since, which is probably making us a very complex, if not one of the most complex distilleries out there. Not only do we produce pot whiskey and grain whiskey, but we make various styles under those 2 categories.
yeah.
Never mind the the array of barrels we get in, then that creates such a diverse permutation that's almost probably infinite. When you think about it.
Brilliant, yeah.
I think that's a very good point, Dave, that you made there about this style of distillate representing the power style or the old Johns Lane distillery, because as you've already said, like that is the power style. We don't use any other type of distillate in any of the Powers brands, you know. So
DNA
we're kind of, you know, we're standing by the heritage of the whole Powers brand. Yeah.
Brilliant, yeah. So do have a question in there, guys, from John Murray. Is there a difference, and this is actually a really good one, is there a difference between this and the UK distiller's cut? So yeah, really, really good question. I don't know, Billy.
That is a good question, John. Yeah, and it's a good observation as well. The distiller's cut is, I think, the difference between the distiller's cut and the whiskey we're tasting here tonight is basically the strength. The cask profile would be the same. It's just the distiller's cut is bottled at 43.2% alcohol, where what we're tasting is 40%. So that's a really good observation. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even now, as you're nosing it, it's still evolving. Like there's a touch of apple there, maybe stewed apple or something coming through, which is nice.
Yeah,
So.
stewed apple. My dad always has pears and vanilla ice cream and a hot slice of apple tart with it, and that's
go.
what I get in a glass.
Pairing.
Yeah. Must get him a bottle of this for Christmas.
But I think for the hot toddy, I mean, what we're talking about was the citrus, like the lemon and the clove, and you can almost get a citrus in here, and you also get the clove spice as well. You know, so we're not adding an awful lot to it by making it into a hot toddy. You know,
complementing what's there,
it's
kind of.
just maybe amplifying those descriptors that are already in there. You know.
Brilliant. Yeah, well, thanks for that question, John. Yeah, absolutely. Really good question. So thanks for that, Dave. And folks, just to remind you of tonight's competition, the question again is, how many barrels to the nearest barrel would we have to fill tomorrow morning in order to replace what we have lost to the Angels today? So please pop your answers in the chat box. Again, the first correct or the closest answer wins. You have about 15 minutes left before the competition closes, so get your guesses in there at least. So for the second half of our tastings, we are going to focus on the art of blending. And obviously that's taken full advantage of having two blenders sitting on the couches here with me. So Billy, again, we're thrilled we could have you joining us here tonight for your first Barrel Club tasting.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here, and it's great to be in this company, and this the conversation's great. I love this kind of setting, you know, because it's very relaxed, and I hope everybody at home's enjoying it.
We're just having a chat, and there happens to be a few hundred people joining in as well. But no, yeah, great to have you here. So look, Billy, I mean, tell us a little bit, I suppose, about your experience and I suppose your role here as master blender at Midleton Distillery.
Okay, well, I've already mentioned, but I don't want to think about it too long, starting with Irish Distillers back in 1976. As an accountant, by the way, yeah. So I spent a number of years in finance before getting an opportunity to move sideways into production, which was great. Like the finance grounding gave me a good overview of the impact on operations had on the finances, but actually to be involved in doing those things was a real it was a real experience for me. Started out as kind of a vat house manager, really, and that was effectively preparing whiskey for bottling. But that role kind of developed over the years, and after quite a number of years then, I had, just looking back, I had covered a lot of the production processes in the whiskey making, you know. So that was great, and never even at that stage thought about being a blender. Although maybe back in my finance days, I did join the taste panel, and for what that was worth. But I think that was my introduction to the real introduction to whiskey production. So as time went on, I got the opportunity in 2003 to become the deputy chief blender. The chief blender at that time was the late Dr. Barry Walsh. So I spent a year working very closely with Barry before he retired in 2004. But in 2004, you know, you were left in charge of, well, a number of brands, but nowhere near as many expressions as we have today. You know, so in relative terms, it was quite a simple job to do at that time. But I think what is key, and I've already mentioned it, is the planning, and you've got to know. As a blender, I think the key thing is having a really intimate knowledge of your inventory, and it's not just knowing that you've got 1.9 million casks in your warehouses as we have now, but it's knowing what's in those casks. You know what the profile is of your spirit type, your cask type. You know, what's your cask profile for each of those spirit types? And equally as important is the age profile of your inventory. Yeah. Because, you know, we can't call our whiskey until it's at least 3 years old. You know, so once you have a good feel for the profile of your inventory, I suppose the next thing to know about is what are the demands on that inventory. So again, it gets back to this planning, you know. And
I'm sure it was kind of probably a shock to people who heard, you know, you started off as an accountant. That might not seem like the obvious choice to eventually become master blender, but when you talk about now how broad the role is, that probably, you know, has stood you to, you know, really well down through the years for planning.
Well, absolutely. I mean, a lot of what we do, and just emphasise it again, is that is the planning, and the reason that we do that planning. Well, I suppose that at the end of the day, what the blenders do is well, we do our best to guarantee a consistent, high quality availability of our products. That's what we're here to do at the end of the day. But how do we achieve that? It's by the planning. I mean, and a lot of my time is spent sitting at a laptop, just monitoring, you know, what's being produced, what's going into the warehouse, what's coming out of the warehouse, and making sure things are kind of balanced as best we can based on the forecast that we're working with. But as well as that, from the sensory point of view, which is maybe your what people basically think a blender should do, is all that quality assessment. You know, taking samples, nosing, tasting, writing tasting notes, all of that.
Obviously, that's very time-consuming, you know, as a
it is, but you've got to have the ability to assess whiskey. You know, from the sensory point of view, you got to have the ability to describe whiskey. First of all, what notes are you getting out of a particular cask that may be a certain spirit type in a particular cask that is so many years old, and it's only over time that you can get that experience. and you get to have some sort of an idea in your head. If you put two of those components together, what's the result going to be? And it's not always what you would expect. Sometimes, Dave will agree with me, that sometimes different flavours pop out of a mixture, which is the fascinating part of it. You know?
Yeah. And obviously, as you said, so much more whiskey's been in the range now. We were a lot busier. We won't say whether you're overworked now or whether you were Dawson back then, but you have. We won't even go there.
I have a really good team.
I was going to say you've got some help in the team now. So obviously, 40 Deirdre's not with us tonight, but Deirdre O'Carroll and obviously Dave. And I suppose it might be interesting, Dave, to get your input, because the fact that there's more than one blender might kind of intrigue people about how, the dynamic of how you work as a team. And
yeah, it's an interesting dynamic, because you kind of all have to be on the same wavelength when you're looking at samples and things. We all have to be, as Billy said, intimate with our inventory, but you have to be very intimate with your brands as well, knowing what flavours really work for what brand. So when we're assessing samples and we're picking what would be good for a certain brand, we're all kind of on the same page as to what would be falling into that category versus falling into this category. And we might have different descriptors, but once you're kind of steady and consistent with your descriptors, every time you assess that sample and you always say the same thing, and Billy or Dee says the same thing of what they're saying, it means you're on the same level. And that's very important. I think if there was a huge team of blenders, it could be too many chefs in the kitchen, especially if they're not aligned. But that's definitely not the case here. I guess my kind of upcoming was, I'd, like yourself, been involved in the academy, but a lot of that involved travelling or asking Billy to come down and do some blending classes with groups. And I think we just struck it off, and eventually it came to a point where Billy was looking for someone to, show the ropes to. And, it was kind of an apprenticeship of sorts, just to see, about the sensory side, but understanding, I think, the more complex management of stock, forecasting for the future, making sure that, okay, we're using stuff that someone left behind for us to use, but we have to make sure we're leaving enough stuff now in barrel for the next generation to use for their 27-year-old Redbreast or whatever is going to come out in the future that's over 25, 30, 40 years. So it's a very interesting role. It's you could say it's multifaceted, and you have to kind of be very much in tune with each other if there's a few blenders in the department.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks for that insight into blending. I think everyone enjoyed that. And I suppose whiskies that you've both become kind of synonymous with over the last few years, being the Redbreast range, and tonight we are going to explore Redbreast 12-year-old, and it's going to be the third sample that we taste this evening, folks. I'm sure a lot of you are very familiar with it already, but just in case you're not, we're going to have a look at a little film now with some kind of well-known characters who are close to Redbreast, so they're going to explain a little bit more.
How's it going? I'm Robin Redbreast, proud to sit on the label of Ireland's most beloved single pot still whiskey. It's like having your face on money, but better. So here we are in Middleton, County Cork, where all the action happens. For whiskey fans, this qualifies as action. Ah, there they are. The lads that stand over every drop of Redbreast are blenders Billy and Dave. Hey lads, I'm getting some peach cobbler and stewed plums on the nose. Yeah, feel free to write that down. Or we can, workshop it a bit too. Endless banter with these two. So now that you know a bit more about Redbreast, why not pour yourself a glass? I'd offer to help, but,
Brilliant. I'm sure it looks like you have the life of Riley in the distillery, lads. I suppose we need to stress as well that there were no birds harmed in the making of that little piece there. But yeah, nice glimpse behind the scenes of the distillery, and I suppose we'll touch on how we kind of work with BirdLife International and the the kind of link with Robbins, etc. as we're tasting through the whiskey. But we're going to jump straight in, folks. We're going to taste Redbreast 12-year-old next. So, Billy, would you like to take us through the tasting, please?
Sure. Yeah. Just grab the glass. Just have a little look at it. I mean, I think that the colour of this is for me is very appealing, and it just makes you want to taste it straight away. But we're not going to do that. You know, we've been talking about the Christmas theme, and for me, Redbreast is, you know, the whiskey itself and everything surrounding Redbreast for me is Christmassy. Take Robin himself, for example, you know. Christmas cards, wrapping paper, all the things you see around Christmas, you know. So I'd say most of you will be familiar. I would like to think all of you will be familiar with Redbreast 12-year-old. The nose, you get, initially you get those spices, the pot still spices, which we want to keep a little bit evident there, because, you know, the pot still distillate is the signature of the whiskey from Midleton. But what we're getting here now is the influence of the Oloroso sherry seasoned casks. A lot of rich fruit, dried fruit. You know, you get your raisins, sultanas, a little bit of dried apricot, even kind of deeper notes there of say a little bit of nutmeg, a little bit of new leather, like chamois leather.
Those fruits really, the dry fruits really jump out of the glass.
It is, yeah, it is the fruit. It is the influence of the Oloroso sherry seasoned cask. You know, we do use bourbon casks in here as well, but the influence of the bourbon, you'll get it. You'll get it in the nose. You'll get the sweeter, the vanilla notes coming from the bourbon cask. But really, the character and the style of Redbreast is driven by the Oloroso sherry. So, quick taste. Bottled at 40%. I always find it very, very approachable. The initial impact that you get in the taste again is that mouth coating effect. And we put it down really to the pot still, we'll say the unmalted barley that we use in the production of the pot still distillate.
You can really pick up that kind of lovely silky kind of mouth coating texture. It's lovely.
It is
rich.
very, very, it's succulently fruity, you know. And then the finish, it's a long finish. You get the fruitiness in the finish, but you also get some of that, some of the wood contribution as well. And it, you know, it's a very long finish. You know, one glass like this could last me all evening.
Yeah.
And even when the glass is empty, I'll still go back and sniff it.
Keep nosing the glass.
Yeah.
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah, and I think a nice thing to point out is, you know, often people think just because Redbreast does have a number of age statements within the range, it could be maybe a natural assumption to people that maybe it's the same whiskey left aged for longer, which is not. Each whiskey within the range has its unique mix of casks and spirit and.
Yeah, that's a very good point, because we do have the age statement range. Like we have the 12-year-old that we're looking at. 15-year-old, anybody that has tried the 15-year-old will probably find that it's maybe a little bit more spicy than the 12-year-old, a little bit more robust. Okay, it's a little bit older, but we kind of tweak the cask split that's in there. We use, going back to the gold label, we use a few refill casks in there that brings the distillate out a little bit more. So it's definitely got the sherry in there, but it's a little bit more spicy. Then the Redbreast 21, we introduce a different distillate type in there, which is the heavier, people sometimes refer to it as trad pot. It's a heavier style of distillate, some of which is has got the sherry. So some of that heavy distillate is coming out of the sherry seasoned casks. And that gives quite a different fruity profile there. It's more berries. It's a lighter, more juicy kind of fruit there, berries. I always, and Dave doesn't always agree with me on this one, I always pick out blackcurrant in Redbreast 21. And then with Redbreast 27. So that's again, at minimum age 27, but with the 27 we've introduced the port cask, ruby port cask maturation. And that again adds another layer to the fruitiness. Stone fruit, very succulent, juicy stone fruit. And then outside of the age statement range, we have the Redbreast Lustau edition, which is very close to my heart. It's taking something akin to Redbreast 12-year-old and then recasking that and finishing it for a year in freshly emptied Oloroso seasoned cask from the Lustau Bodega.
You're enhancing that.
So it brings out that sherry wine influence right at the end.
Yeah. And there's a question after popping in there, Billy, which is actually relative to what we're talking to. Really good question, I know one that probably a lot of listeners have often asked. Are Redbreast 12 and Redbreast 12 cask strength the same whiskey? Or how would you describe it?
That's a really good question. We effectively treat them as two different whiskies, although they are the same cask profile. And I'll maybe just explain that a little bit. Whenever we're doing the cask selection for Redbreast 12-year-old, it's bottled in much bigger volumes than the cask strength, obviously. So we're doing much larger vattings of the Redbreast 12-year-old. And so what we do is we identify parcels of casks that we would like to see samples of, that we could put together to make the next vatting of Redbreast 12-year-old. We get those samples, we screen each cask sample. We can reject any that we don't want to use. But other than that, we can say to the guys in the operation, okay, you can use any of those casks. We have screened them, they're all okay to use for Redbreast 12-year-old. 12-year-old cask strength's a little bit different. It's bottled in much smaller batches. And what we do then is we identify the casks, the range of casks that have the potential to go into the cask strength. And we'll check those samples, but then we'll decide exactly which cask. So we'll nominate the casks that go into the batch or the vatting of cask strength. And the reason we do that is you got to appreciate the size of a sherry butt. It's 500 litres. So that whiskey has to be exactly right for us to use it in the cask strength vatting, because one cask, if it's wrong, can upset everything.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will specify every individual cask for the cask strength, whereas the larger batch of the 12-year-old is going to be bottled at 40%. We still have the quality system in place, but there's maybe more of a, from the operational side of it, to make it as easy as possible from a logistics point of view, from where the casks actually are in the warehouse, we let the operators then select the casks within the range that we have approved.
It's back to that tracking and keeping casks and
Yeah,
knowing where they are and
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think, is that fair enough,
Yeah,
Dave?
absolutely.
yeah, brilliant. Thanks. That's a great question. And I suppose I briefly mentioned the work we're doing with BirdLife International, you know, as part of working with Redbreast. Dave, I know you, along with Billy, do a lot of work with Redbreast. As part of that link up, have you had any opportunities to work with our celebrity help, if you will, Chris O'Dowd?
Yeah, only recently actually we did a Redbreast event in a place called Caboo Woods up in County Cavan, and it was an event to, I suppose, raise awareness for BirdLife International. So Chris was there as kind of the ambassador, and what we did was we did a lovely meal with made by Richie Corrigan, who's also a big Redbreast fan and advocate for the Redbreast brand. And I suppose the theme of the night was to keep the common birds common, essentially. So our songbirds that we're all very used to seeing in our back gardens and things like that, you know, they're around in plenty now, but you know, according to statistics and things, what have you, that's not the case going into the future. So unless we start doing a bit of kind of advocacy now and awareness for that, people might be aware of it. So that's what BirdLife International are doing. They're raising the awareness, and we're just playing a very small role in trying to help with that awareness. So, for example, the bird feeder was an example of one thing where there's a donation from every bottle sold going to BirdLife International, and also the ads that you see online with Chris and the other celebrity, the Robin. Any likes or repostings of that gets a donation as well.
Oh yeah.
So there's the feeder Billy has.
Something we prepared earlier here, Billy.
Yeah. I've just pinched this from the prize fund for tonight's competition. But that's the bird feeder that we are. You know, hopefully from the sales of this, we're hoping to raise around about €70,000 for BirdLife International. We also have the social video with Chris O'Dowd that gets a donation for every like on the video or every view of the video. That we're hoping to like or share. That's it. We're hoping to raise another 30,000, a total of about €100,000. Hopefully, going to go to BirdLife International. So support us there.
Good cause, yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Billy and Dave. A few more questions did come in there. I think probably relative to the final whiskey of the night. So thanks, folks. Keep the questions coming in. There's a good one that I'm going to come back to when we taste the final whiskey of the night in a few minutes' time. But before that, you know, folks, our aim with Barrel Club is to remind you of some of the old favourites from Midleton Distillery, like we've just tried. But of course, to introduce you to new whiskies along the way as well. So now it really is beginning to feel a lot like Christmas, because it's the moment we've all been patiently waiting for tonight. It's another Barrel Club exclusive first bottling. Tonight's feature bottle, it's Redbreast Christmas Cake Edition. So Redbreast has, you know, so often been described as Christmas cake in a bottle. Billy and Dave, you finally decided to embrace that tagline, I suppose. Dave, do you want to tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, you know, we would always use descriptors like Christmas cake for the likes of Redbreast 12, and what we mean by that is certain flavours, mostly derived from, say, the use of the sherry casks. We talk about dried fruits, raisins, sultanas, even almonds, like marzipan type notes. And then the alcohol surrounding that kind of would be reminiscent of, you know, making a Christmas cake. So we always would use that as a very good descriptor for Redbreast 12. But I suppose the challenge was put to us, is there a way of making a Redbreast that's more Christmas cake than the 12? So we said, challenge accepted, put our blending hats on. And we know a lot of the flavour that we talk about, as I mentioned, comes from the sherry side of things. So it led us to look at, okay, well, as you know, Billy would say, like our inventory, like our stock, what's there, what's the right spirit in the right casks that might have highlights of those flavors that we can kind of expose really for the making of a Christmas cake style whiskey. And I suppose we also thought outside the box of not just trying to recreate the flavor of a cake, but the idea of Christmas and the nostalgia that goes around Christmas. So like, you know, nice fire at Christmas, you know, candles that are lit everywhere that smell of maybe cinnamon, obviously Christmas cake and you know, chocolates and nuts and things like that. So we end up making a style that comprises 5 barrel types, essentially.
Yeah. Actually, sorry, not to jump in, Dave, but one of the questions specifically asked, have we ever used PX sherry cask and other types of sherry casks? So this is the perfect, thanks for that question, and this is perfect way to...
No, good segue for that.
Yeah.
Because people would be familiar with the Redbreast PX edition we did, which we launched last year as a limited edition at the time. But we haven't stopped getting those barrels in, you know, and that's down to the relationship we have with the cooperage in Spain, in Jerez, Antonio Paez Lobato, and their bodega as well. So over the 4 decades of building relations with them, you know, Billy and predecessors like Brendan Monk's, you know, when we come across great casks like that, it's not because we've found them on an open market. It's that this family has been looking at those types of wines and barrels and kind of really giving us first refusal, given the relationship we have. So we've always been squirreling a few of those away. But even longer than that, for the PX, we've been squirreling away cream sherry casks. So what cream sherry is, it's another style of sherry, obviously, but it's a mix of Oloroso wine with Pedro Jimenez wine, or PX wine. So what that type of wine is, it's made from the same name of the grape, the Pedro Jimenez grape, and it's very sweet. So when you look at those casks that we get as well, we're combining them in the making of Christmas Cake Edition. So the third unusual or new barrel to Redbreast, I guess, is sherry casks which actually haven't been even seasoned with sherry. So we call them virgin European oak butts, essentially. And they're very giving in what we call that oak contribution. And talk about vanilla, we talk about tannin, but also like kind of smoked wood, or even like an oak wood perfume, like incense type character, which again would be reminiscent at Christmas. So what we did was we took whiskies which have aged in bourbon barrels and sherry Oloroso, which is typical throughout the Redbreast range, but we've also included barrels which are those new European oak casks. We've included the PX casks, which we also had used in a previous edition, and the cream sherry, which I believe was the first time we're using cream sherry for a Redbreast edition. And where all that flavour comes together is, think of the virgin oak casks as not seasoned but heavily oaked, and then the cream sherry, which is very sweet, very juicy, very viscous style, and adding a dollop then of whiskey that's in PX alone. So even further accentuates that sweet viscosity, even kind of sweet orange marmalade type characteristics as well. So we had a bit of fun with it. We'd made a few prototypes, I remember, and looking at them with Billy, and Billy was like, we should probably up the intensity of these Christmas cake notes even more so. So it was kind of from a conservative role, we actually went a bit more radical in the Christmas Cake Edition, just to have even more fun with it. So we put in more of those new oak casks in the inclusion, and we left it at cask strength, so it's 58%. So for everyone at home, we hope they enjoy it as well. If you want to have a nose and see what you think. So deliciously sweet. We talk about like sugar glazed cherries type characteristic. Think of figs and dates like normal, but there's that extra red berry compote kind of juicy character to it as well. And the wood is quite large on it as well, the oak.
Yeah, you can really pick up
And I love what the oak, or that virgin European oak is doing, because for me, there's nuttiness, but within Christmas cake, you might get walnuts, but also in the marzipan, you've got almonds. So you've got a kind of almost a bitter nuttiness there, along with a sweet nuttiness, you know. And it was fun, actually, as Dave said, going through the inventory and said, well, what could we use that could, you know, that could amplify these flavours? And the nuttiness, it was the European oak for me was where we were going to get the nuttiness from, but trying to keep it under control. But as Dave said, you know, why?
Yeah. Let the animal out of the cage.
And I think the use of the PX in there kind of tempers the nuttiness with fruitiness, you know, and sweetness. And I think the cream sherry, well, we couldn't leave out the cream sherry, you know. It was Christmas cake. I mean, everybody has their
It's what comes out at Christmas.
Yeah.
You know.
Please, folks, let us know what you think as well. Throw any of your reactions into the chat. Really curious to hear what you think.
And cream sherry it's an unusual term, you know, cream, but, you know, historically, in England, particularly when sherry was imported in, because it's something that, you know, everyone drank, including, you know, young babies who like milk. Sherry was referred to as sherry milk. And Harvey's Bristol Cream created a sherry that when they had in their shop, a lady came in and she said, if the other stuff is the milk, this is definitely the cream. And that's where sherry cream actually got its name from.
Yeah.
So, you know, even back then they knew that cream sherry was just on another level in terms of, I suppose, intensity and sweetness, with a little hint of nuttiness as well to it. But we're going to have a taste and see what we think.
And we just do have a question in there as well, guys, from Jim. Good question. Are the virgin European oak barrels fired? And if so, once or twice?
Yeah. Fired to a toasted level rather than charred, but only once. And that, I mean, it's the level of toasting is something which we agree with the cooperage. There has to be some form of heat involved in the cask production process in order to be able to form the cask, to bend the staves, you know. So that was all that we'd asked them to do for these European oak casks.
Yeah.
So just a kind of it's just about a medium level of toasting. It's not even a heavy toast, but enough to form the cask, but also enough to leave a bit of room for ingression into the wood and a bit of exchange of flavours from the wood. Yeah.
And I know, purely for business reasons now, but I know you do your regular trips to Spain just to supervise, you know, the even gone far as back as the sherry cask maturation.
Absolutely, it's not fun at all.
Yeah, someone has to do it. Yeah.
But yeah, so it's one of my favourite times of the year, maybe in the spring, to go, you know, and talk to the coopers, tell them, you know, place orders. Like back to the forecasting again, they've got to know well in advance how many casks we're going to ask for each year, because they have to go and source the wood, but they have to source it and leave it to dry for 18 months before they can even think about making it into a cask. So they have the same problem with forecasting.
Yeah, of course.
Well, maybe it doesn't go as far, but you know, it's really the wood suppliers that, or the landowners, the forests that have a bigger problem with forecasting than I do.
Yeah.
Because they have to wait
a very long schedule.
100 years or 150 years for a tree to grow. You know, so.
Yeah. There's actually a great comment in there, guys, from Owen, just describing Redbreast Christmas cake. So, a rich, dark fruit bomb, smells like Christmas cake, reminds me of my mother warning me to not open the oven while the cake was baking. So,
Great, Owen.
that's a little bit nostalgic memory.
Ah, yeah.
Amazing.
What do you think yourself, Tommy?
Amazing, yeah. At the cast strength as well. It's beautiful. It's still
Yeah, that's maybe one thing just to bear in mind is that it is 58%, you know, and we're sipping away at it.
think of
like 50.
no.
Yeah.
Just yeah,
A bit mellower than you
Yeah.
think.
That cinnamon spice there.
at the end,
Yeah.
lovely. Yeah, very nice finish. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of my fortified wine cask. I think it's really nice that you have the influence of more than one there, that you can kind of pick up, you know, there's a bit of sweet fruit coming from one, more dark fruit,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
toasted wood. So, and yeah, glad the people in the chat seem to be agreeing. So yeah, keep your thoughts and comments coming in, folks. There actually is a question just in there from Andy. Wants to know, is there any trad pot in the blend of this one?
No, we held that off this time. We didn't. It's already complex enough with all the mixture of casks, so we wanted to make sure it stayed in line with the Redbreast kind of style at the same time. So we used the same 2 distillates as we used for Redbreast 12, and then we included the use of the different cask types on top of that. So it's trying to create a similarity within the brand, but additional influences on top of it.
Yeah.
And we felt if we added in extra trad pot again, it's just adding more maybe complexity and diversity, and focusing maybe less on the barrels and that Christmas cake influence.
Yeah.
It might have brought up a bit more additional herbal and licorice qualities. So we thought about it, but we just said, let's keep a constant against Redbreast 12 in terms of the distillate types and the bourbon and the sherry, but then up that Christmas cake type of side to the Redbreast 12, and that was to do with the barrels then.
Yeah, it's a very small batch, and
Yeah.
it could become very complicated rather than complex. I think we've got a really complex whiskey
fine
here,
line of, yeah.
but we don't want it to be too complicated, you know.
Yeah. There's another comment in there. Ken is picking up chestnuts and plums coming through there. So it's nice to see everyone's picking up their own little.
Good, yeah.
nuances.
That wood, the chestnut is good. Like the wood influence you could pick that up.
Very
yeah.
much so.
Plums is another good fleshy dark fruit. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's a few comments coming in as well that a few people have just added a few drops of water just to bring it down a bit, maybe open it up.
Yeah,
Obviously, each to their own.
absolutely. Yeah, that wouldn't do any harm at all.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very much how you like it is the best way. Oh, brilliant. I think it's an amazing whiskey to finish with. And I think when you promise something like Christmas cake in a glass, it's there's a lot to live up to. So I have to say I'm very impressed. And I know you guys don't know about this, but I was up very early this morning, folks. I was up at the crack of dawn because I wanted to, when I heard it was going to be Christmas cake in a glass, I wanted to put this to the test. So nothing to worry about now, but just something to complement this. We do have some Christmas cake. So I'm going to leave that there just for you to pick away at.
Thanks, Tommy. You shouldn't have went to
That's
that.
why if I have bags under my eyes, it's because I was up early baking that. Trouble. Yeah, because when we do talk about the plum or the raisins, the currants, and sometimes I know, but you often say you get even kind of marzipan notes from them.
Yeah.
So it's nice to compliment.
You're too kind.
Again, I don't want there to be any left on those plates now by the end of the night. But yeah, any comments, folks? Keep them rolling in. But I think an amazing whiskey to finish off with. So yeah, congratulations, Billy, Dave, and obviously Dee, who's not here. I think it's a really fitting whiskey to finish on. And we are, unfortunately, fast approaching the end of the show, folks. But before we wrap, we do have some very important business to take care of, which I'm sure you're all very interested in, because we are ready to announce our competition winner. So you'll remember that earlier on we asked how many barrels to the nearest barrel would we have to fill tomorrow morning simply to replace what we have lost to the Angels today. And Roisin, I believe you were going to provide the answer for us.
I did indeed. I was out with the calculator for a while now, just trying to crunch the numbers and just make sure you got it right there now, Billy. But yeah, so the answer is, do we have a drum roll? Anyone?
Yes.
So it is 117 barrels we'd have to fill.
I think that's, mind-blowing figure, really.
Crazy.
So like when you think 117 barrels, literally just escaping as vapor in the air. I mean, it's hard to.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like,
Yeah.
but you know, we have about 253 million litres of alcohol maturing at the minute. You know,
Yeah.
so it's the numbers are big.
As you say, like about 1.9 million casks in storage, but still 117 a day is a lot. I know it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot, but
Well,
it
you
adds
know,
up.
what other business is there that you're producing something today that you know is not going to be there whenever you need it? You know, in 12 years' time for Redbreast.
Yeah, and it's probably worth mentioning, you know, that, you know, obviously the Angel share worldwide, it's a fact of life for a whiskey distillery, but that is why, you know, typically whiskies are going to drop in strength with age because we're losing alcohol through evaporation. Typically, why older whiskies are more expensive. You know, it all feeds into the kind of the forecast in the whiskey, but also the final.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point from the got the accountant's hat on.
Yeah.
You know, from the financial point of view, you know, you got to realise why are older whiskies more expensive? Is because like they didn't cost any more to make the day they were made, but you've had to warehouse them. There's a cost of warehousing each year, the cost of the cask, you know, and that adds on every year.
Yeah.
You know, so the longer it's in the warehouse, the more overhead costs it has picked up.
At least the Angels are happy in Middleton anyway. That's,
But
that's one thing.
the Angels are getting
getting their
share. Yeah.
And another person who's going to be happy tonight is our competition winner. So I am very pleased to announce that the winner tonight, with a guess of 115 barrels, that was a very good answer, is Robert Allen. So congratulations, Robert. And I hope you enjoy your prize. You got in there very, very early. So for our Barrel Club members who joined us back in December of last year, this Redbreast exclusive first bottling was your fourth and final quarterly delivery as a year one member of Barrel Club. We would like to sincerely thank you for joining us on this journey of Irish whiskey exploration, and we really hope that you enjoyed the experience. And obviously it goes without saying, you know, we hope you'll remain with us as we continue to explore whiskies together, you know, old and new whiskies from our distillery here at Middleton. You will have received emails from us regarding resubscription, and also, you know, just pointing out some of the exciting year two perks, so please do keep an eye on those. And Dave, I know you and the team, I suppose you've been busy planning the year ahead. I mean, is there anything at all you can maybe tell us about 2023 or?
Yeah, there's a lot in the pipeline, but the next drop will be March, just ahead of Patrick's Day. So what we're going to focus on and showcase is the wonderful word of Napogue, which is a triple distilled single malt whiskey ranging in expressions from 12 up to 21 years of age. And it's a fantastic range which maybe a lot of people aren't too familiar with. So I think it'll be a very good one to show come March next year.
Brilliant.
Then for the remainder of the year, we'll bring you like a kind of a portfolio of styles, kind of introducing some Barrel Club exclusives as well as some of the old specials as well. So good for people to keep an eye on social channels and see what's going to come.
Watch this space. Brilliant. Sounds good, Dave. Thanks for that. And, you know, just to reiterate, folks, obviously that comes on top of the other membership perks. So that does include your distillery visit. We'd love to welcome you here to Middleton or Bow Street. If that's more convenient, you can take a Jameson Black Barrel blending class up in Bow Street either. And unfortunately, that does more or less wrap up our tasting for this evening. So thanks a million for tuning in. We do hope you enjoyed the tasting as much as we have, and that you discovered a bit more about Redbreast, obviously the taste of Christmas, and just about our home here in Middleton. A huge thank you to Billy, Roisin and Dave for joining us and for obviously sharing your insights on the whiskies and about the distillery. So thanks very much to all of you. Hope you enjoyed it. Before we finish though, folks, Roisin also has a little surprise for us, and it's better than my Christmas cake surprise, I'm sure. So Roisin is going to close out the show with an acoustic version of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas. She's a lady of many talents, so I'll get your guitar there, Roisin.
Thank you. Hiding it on me.
So, there you go. Thank you. So just while Roisin's getting set up there and getting prepared. Just a reminder, folks, that our next virtual tasting will be in March. So please do keep an eye out for updates over the coming months. We look forward to seeing you again soon. But in the meantime, from myself, Billy, Dave and Roisin, obviously wishing you and your loved ones a very happy Christmas. So sláinte and take it away, Roisin.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. Next year, all your troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. Next year, all your troubles will be miles away. And here we are, as in olden days, happy olden days of yore. And faithful friends who are near to us shall be near to us once more. And have yourself a merry little Christmas. May your heart be light. Next year, all your troubles will be out of sight. And have yourself a merry little Christmas now. Guys, I really hope you enjoyed our Christmas tasting at the Barrel Club. Hopefully we'll see you in the new year and hope you have a wonderful Christmas. So I'm going to sing you out with one last song, so I hope you all know it. It's people pleaser, so it's not Wonderwall, unfortunately, but we'll go with it. So. The snow is falling all around me. Children playing, having fun. 'Tis the season of love and understanding. Merry Christmas, everyone. We're gonna have a party tonight.
Happy Christmas, everyone.